What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my Week 11 NFL Power Rankings, and what an exciting and weird week of football. Saw a ton of things I just never thought I'd see, but we're also in the back half of the season, so playoff pictures are starting to form, so an exciting time to be an NFL fan. Here are my power rankings. Let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let's jump right into it. Yeah, the Houston Texans staying pat at 32. You know, this is just a team that's just not ready to win games right now. And this time, this week they lose to the Giants. Another big game where they allowed the opposing running back to go crazy. And this time it's Saquon Barkley, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. And, look, if you're a Houston fan, just, as hard as it is, embrace this time period because it's going to net you a top 2 overall pick more than likely. So you're going to have your choice of Stroud or Young, or maybe that choice will be made for you at number 1 overall. We'll have to wait and see. But embrace the bad now so that way you can get that future franchise quarterback because that offense could certainly use that bump. Then we get to the Bears and, I don't know if really this is the guy who, preseason was saying, under 6.5 wins. That's, one of my favorite bets to make. Yeah, I don't know if this team's the second worst team in the league, but that's just kind of how the power rankings played out. Carolina wins, so I got to give them the nudge here this week. But, if you're a Chicago fan, Justin Fields is the story right now. So as much as I still think he can make every throw, you could ask him, still looking to see that growth of the pass game, but, just elevating the floor with his rushing ability, that has, a glimmer of hope there for Bears fans. And, I do think he'll improve his decision maker. Hopefully you get rid of, the Jeff Okudah, type of plays where chucking him to a former college teammate. Now, that didn't really correlate, but it is kind of a cool story that it went from, Fields to Okudah. But those type of bad decisions that, in a 1-point game loom pretty large. So those things I think will get cleaned up. And then plus, another offseason where they have a ton of money, adding another wide receiver, maybe getting some better pass protecting offensive linemen because they've been able to move the line of scrimmage in the run game, but, pass protection is still a bit of an issue for some of those guys. And then you flip over to the defense and they could definitely use a little bit of an overhaul there. So, just a team that, their quarterback is exciting right now, but the rest of it still needs a lot of work. Then we get the Panthers who did win on Thursday Night Football. And, maybe it's just because that game was played so long ago. That game feels really forgettable, solid win. And I think there is something to it. And we'll talk about this here in a minute with the Commanders. From a betting perspective, maybe there is something to, division rivals playing to a split, right? Because the reason it felt like, with Washington, we'll talk about it in a minute, but with Carolina against Atlanta, it's like, we just saw these two teams play and the game played completely different. Weather is certainly an impact in playing in, Charlotte versus the Dome in Atlanta. The game just felt really, just off compared to what we had seen previously. And much improved defensive, showing from Carolina. Give them credit there after, having Joe Mixon rip their heart out. So that's a step in the right direction, but it almost just felt like it had to play out that way because it was going to be a divisional split. So I don't know. Maybe that's something to look into when it comes to betting. Then the Broncos, lost a lethargic game to the Titans. I mean, 17-10. I was even joking with like, it's the hurry up offense. I don't think either team scores 20, and fortunately enough, I was right there. Denver's just down bad, man. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with Nathaniel Hackett. I don't know if they can spark Russ, if that's even, a card in their hand at this point. Just big yikes if you're a Denver fan. That offense is just really hard to watch right now. Then we get to the Raiders. I had to nudge them down the board. I mean, they're just so bad. And, I know the Davis family put out a statement saying they're going to stick with Josh McDaniels. But, man, I think that could be a huge mistake. And I think part of that is just because they don't want to, pay him out, right? You already had to do that with John Gruden where he had guaranteed money, doesn't make it to the end of this contract, got to, fork over that cash. I think he wants to do that with McDaniels, who just got a nice contract this past offseason. So that's probably part of it, but when you look at the direction of this team, I mean, there's reasons, there's jokes after the game saying every NFL team should hire a fan off the streets to see if they can beat Josh McDaniels. Like, there's a reason that narrative is out there. And, Jeff Saturday's not just a random dude off the street. I made fun of that hiring, but just think about that. Me and plenty of others criticized that Jeff Saturday hiring so much that then Josh McDaniels lost to him after he had been the head coach for, 5 days? He got hired on Tuesday, games on Sunday. That's crazy. So, yeah, I don't know. And that defense just, Chandler Jones, one of the worst free agent signings. That's just looked like a complete miss right there. So it's just tough. The Raiders are not the team that we expect them to be. Then we get to the Jags, who actually kind of hung tough with Kansas City. You get the onside kick, and then even the muffed punt lead in the first half. They kind of hang around, but then they missed that field goal. And that kind of felt like what we saw from the Jags, where they had the right approach. Like Doug Peterson had them playing aggressive. And including that onside kick, doing those little things where it's like, hey, Kansas City is a legit team. We have to do any and all things that we can to keep up. but they just didn't quite have that level of execution. Now, I think Trevor Lawrence was, better than what we've seen for a majority of his career, but so you're making some steps in the right direction, kind of like Justin Fields, where it's like we're not living to that potential yet, but we're heading in that direction, it feels like. And they love Christian Kirk, especially on the goal line, slot out. They call that play week in and week out. It's amazing to see how much it always works. But, you ran into a buzzsaw in Kansas City. And one team's a Super Bowl contender, one team's in a rebuild. So it's not really an even playing field, in my opinion. Then we do get the Commanders, who, you give Philadelphia your first loss. And that's a huge win for the Commanders. They're now back to 500. They're going to be hanging their hat on that. And now it'll be interesting, Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke. Wentz definitely has more talent, but he's also just, a turnover-prone machine. And, Heineke, something about him kind of gives that team a spark, despite, not having as much talent as someone like a former number 2 overall pick like Carson Wentz. But that said, that game to me, I give them credit, but that game was the exact parlay they needed. And I truly look at it as like a 6-leg parlay. If anything missed, it wasn't going to go their way. We'll talk about it more when we get to the Philadelphia side. Let me just focus on Washington here. Control the time of possession. They were going to have to do that, keep Jalen Hurts and company on the sideline. And they picked up enough third downs. Dude, at one point, they were like 12 of 16 on third down in the fourth quarter. Like, at some point in the fourth quarter, they were 12 of 16. I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like that. And it's because they kept getting themselves into, third man duels. I mean, someone who watched football in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, maybe early half of that 90s decade, was looking at this and like, yes, this is what football should be. Control the time of possession, just 3 or 4 yards and a pound of dust. That's kind of what it was. And, that game plan worked. They got enough out of Brian Robinson. They got enough out of Taylor Heineke, and especially him as a passer in the first half. They got some chunk plays. Terry McLaurin was fantastic. And maybe that's the way to win moving forward for this Washington team. It's just run the ball 35 some odd times and hope Heineke or whoever can hook up with Terry McLaurin when, the defense creeps up and they make enough third down conversions, make enough throws to T-Mac. They can win some games, and they're already at 500. So kind of exceeding expectations there, and, keep it up. They'll certainly be out of this bottom group of 8 here, which I like to call the bottom barrel. They're kind of playing their way out of that over the last couple of weeks. And then we get to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think beat a good New Orleans Saints team in a lot of ways. It is interesting to see Andy Dalton, how much he struggled against the Ravens and the Steelers. There's probably something to it, considering how much he used to see those two in the AFC North. And it kind of felt like those two defenses just understood what, they understood him. They understood where his tendencies, his quirks, all that sort of stuff. And, obviously paying dividends, and you get a couple turnovers late. And then, gave credit to Pittsburgh. A ton going into this week about the run game, Najee versus Warren, what are they going to do? And, against the Saints defense, which we'll talk more about this once we get to New Orleans, but they were scheming it up pretty well in the run game. Got some nice favorable blocking sets, and the offensive line was doing their part. Right? They had big holes. Najee Harris, almost a 100-yard rusher, and then plus you get Warren in the mix, and he had some big plays. And he's also, a nice pass catcher, just as much Najee is, but he brings that explosiveness as a pass catcher. So, as much life as we've seen in a while from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it allowed me to finally get to wear this hoodie in one of my videos, so I appreciate it. Then we get on to the next set of 8 teams. The Atlanta Falcons, they lost to Carolina. I kind of already talked about this. Just wasn't wasn't Atlanta's best outing. And it kind of felt like that game was going to be destined for a loss for them, which, I meant to say that on the hurry up offense, and I, should have hit Carolina money line just as a little bit of a hedge, just because that game felt like it was kind of headed towards, a divisional split. Those division teams seem to find a way to do that. Washington, Carolina both kind of pulled off upsets. Definitely the Washington one a little bit more extreme than Carolina, Atlanta. I digress. Cleveland Browns got absolutely embarrassed by Miami, and I mean, a lot of the credit I think really goes to Miami. It's just, I don't think Cleveland has the firepower right now to keep up with an offense like that. Like Miami right now might be the offense that's humming at the best, the quality right now. And Tua is slinging it. And, Mike McDaniel, Pro Football Focus's George Chahuri even said he should be Rookie of the Year. And I mean, in a lot of ways, I get it. Like, what he's done to revolutionize that offense and just kind of keep them, no matter what, on track when it's been Tua, it's been marvelous. But, for the Browns' perspective, when it's Jacoby Brissett trying to keep up with that offense, it's not going to happen. And you get Nick Chubb with, Nick Chubb type of plays, and it's like, okay, yeah, but there's only so much you can do. Keep up with Miami. So I just don't think the Browns are in a position to do that with their backup quarterback. Then we get to the Lions, up 5 more spots, and, big road win. I think they even said at the end of the call, first road win for Dan Campbell. That's kind of surprising. But to do it in Chicago, do it in a division rival's place, that's a solid place to begin. That's a good place to get your first road win. And the defense is, I think the biggest change that we've seen, last week I actually think the defense had a pretty decent performance, but they're generating more turnovers, right? Like that's the biggest thing that's changed over the last 3 weeks is they're generating turnovers, getting extra possessions to an offense that has firepower, has explosiveness. Ben Johnson's, for the most part this year, been a good OC and been able to maximize the talent he has on that side of the ball. So I think that's been the biggest difference. And, case in point, Jeff Okudah, gets a pick thrown right to him and, bad decision by Fields, but beneficiary is Okudah, and then he takes it back for 6. Those types of plays just weren't happening until the first, 6-7 weeks of the season or whatever it was. So that's been a big thing that's changed. And you get back DeAndre Swift, getting that much more firepower. I'm really excited to see what Jameson Williams can do for this offense as well. Then we get to the New Orleans Saints, and I kind of go back to this Saints-Pittsburgh game. What really concerns me for this New Orleans team, because, look, Andy Dalton's been a nice story, but you kind of had a feeling that eventually his good play was going to run out, right? The clock was going to strike midnight on this little pseudo-Cinderella run of Andy Dalton's. And they're just, down Michael Thomas. There's only so much Chris Olave can do by himself, right? But then you look at that defense, and, I want to give credit to Pittsburgh and even Matt Canada, their OC, and how, he schemed it up. It was well-designed run plays that were, putting the offensive line in a good spot to win one-on-ones, and the offensive line did that. But that being said, now it's back-to-back weeks where the Saints defense, not these 2 weeks, but the 2 weeks before that, it was like, okay, New Orleans is back on track as a defensive team. They're going to be one of the better units in the league on that side of the ball. Then the last 2 weeks, it's like, okay, well, you ran into the Ravens, who their identity is run the ball, so maybe you can ignore that. But then when Pittsburgh's kind of running it down your throat, what is the Saints defense? I got to be able to pick out what your identity is, and at this point, they're just too inconsistent. And when, it's Andy Dalton kind of running out of his, charm, if you will, as a quarterback, that's just, a bad recipe right there. So it'd be interesting to see what they try to do to change it up. Can Jameis Winston come back and maybe you just play the variance, route of it, and, there's going to be some good, there's going to be some bad, and I don't know. This team's just not living up to what their potential could have been, and, part of that is because James got hurt, but Michael Thomas isn't playing either, just tough year, and the Saints aren't meeting my expectations. Rams had to move them down, and they're probably heading down further down this list. They're just not a good football team, dude. Like, they're just not good. So, it's one of those things where, the Saints and the Rams, actually, while they're right next to each other, let's talk about it. Regardless of what Detroit does, it feels like they're going to have a pretty damn good first-round pick just because of the Rams, right? Like, that feels like a top 10 pick locked in, just because the Rams are not very good, and Matt Stafford's hurt. Now Cooper Kupp's going to miss some time. Luckily enough, not a season-ending injury, but that offense was struggling as is. Now John Wolford is just not going to do that much more, and especially if he's down Cooper Kupp. So yikes. So congratulations, Lions fans. And then for Philadelphia, we haven't gotten to talk to them about yet, but they may be playing in the NFC Championship game, but may also have a top 5 pick because New Orleans just played that bad. So wow, ton of credit to Brad Holmes, who, if the question comes up, do you keep Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes? Do you keep one or the other? I definitely think Brad Holmes is the guy to keep around, which I hope they keep both around for one more year, so let me make that clear. But I think if there was, one head that had to roll, I'd definitely rather keep Brad Holmes around. I just don't think he's been really given the opportunity to fully complete this rebuild. I think he's been a GM thinking he's got 6 years to make this work, and I think his actions kind of back that up. And, this type of move is exactly what we're talking about. Now you're going to have another top 10 pick, regardless of what they're doing and, maybe their struggles. They're going to have a top 10 pick just because the Rams are, bad and, took advantage of a good trade opportunity. Continuing with the Eagles with the Saints. Anyways, let's move on now. Long tangent aside, the Arizona Cardinals, hey, solid win. You beat the Rams. The drop from Matt Stafford to John Wolford versus Kyler Murray to Colt McCoy. The Cardinals definitely had the less steep drop, which is kind of amazing because Kyler Murray, in my opinion, probably better. If I were to start a franchise right now, I'd want Kyler Murray over Matt Stafford. Now, part of that is also like if I'm building a franchise, I'm thinking 5-10 years down the road. But nonetheless, Colt McCoy did just enough. Made just enough throws. AJ Green helps him out. DeAndre Hopkins with a 10-catch game. Rondale Moore, week by week has gotten a bigger and bigger role, which that's just encouraging. It sounds like they're going to get Hollywood Brown back pretty soon. So it does feel like that offensive firepower is starting to get, improved upon just by, time. Rondale Moore getting better in his young career, and now you're going to get Hollywood Brown back. And now we're going to look at, with Robbie Anderson, with Hollywood, with D-Hop, with Rondale, now we get to really see the full stable of weapons, and hopefully Kyler Murray is back soon as well. But that defense is still a problem. But, I'll let the Cardinals have a good win this week. Colts. And look, there's two things to address here. 8-spot bump after they beat the Raiders. Do I think a win against the Raiders is really that impactful? Does it change your resume that much? No. But they are, 4-4-1, 4-5-1, 4-5-1, I think. That's not a bad record. So, give him credit there. And that defense, like Stephon Gilmore still has gas in the tank. And I mean, you saw in that last play, right? Bobby Okereke has been awesome. And, missing Shaq Leonard for sure changed the complexion of the defense. But if Bobby Okereke deserves a ton of credit. And DeForest Buckner, still a good player, making some impact. And Kwity Paye, taking another step forward, primarily as a run defender. Like to see him grow a little bit more as a pass rusher, but nonetheless, he's gotten better, with another year of, experience. But the biggest reason here is like, hey, look, Sam Ehlinger, kind of some spunk, some moxie. He can, extend plays behind a bad offensive line. He's got that mobility factor, but in no world is he anywhere near as good of a quarterback as Matt Ryan. And I'm saying that solely as, grading them as passers, what they can do in the pocket, and even what they're doing at the line of scrimmage, right? Sam Ehlinger is just not a Matt Ryan caliber quarterback. So what you lose with that mobility, you gain a ton in an actual quarterback play. And that offensive line was really pretty solid this week. Now, part of that, again, Chandler Jones, been a disappointing signing. And, Max Crosby was relatively quiet in this one, which is disappointing if you're a Raiders fan. But because the offensive line was okay, you didn't really need that spunky moxie running around quarterback like Sam Ehlinger. Matt Ryan could make some throws. He had some time to be a, pocket passing quarterback, which he always has been. And therefore the offense just had its floor lifted, completely off the ground. It was a complete facelift to that offense, in my opinion. And then, you get a 39-yard scramble out of Matt Ryan. Sometimes weird shit happens. Cool. But nonetheless, I just think from that QB change, that is worthy of a couple spots. And then, hey, yeah, you did get a win on the road against a team that needed a win. Now, granted, Josh McDaniels is a bad coach, in my opinion. That's in and of itself a conversation we had. But Jeff Saturday, 1-0. And, it was going to be an interesting matchup, him against Nick Sirianni, two coaches potentially without a loss this season, but now Sirianni can't even say that. So Jeff Saturday, last head coach in the NFL this year without a loss. How about it? The Green Bay Packers, obviously I'm being facetious when I say that. Packers up a spot. Hey, you started to see it. You started to see what could potentially be a turnaround. But that being said, I'm only going to move them up one spot because it's just one game. It's a good Dallas team, for sure. But let me see it one more time. Let me see a little bit bigger of a sample size before I totally buy into Christian Watson. Now, I will say I want to give a ton of credit here to Matt LaFleur, and I hope we see this continue. When you use Watson on something other than just go balls and 9 routes, where when he's trying to locate the football, he's having to turn his head and his shoulder. Sorry, I'm trying to use my body as an actual visual. But when you're asking him to do that much, it makes it that much harder for him to track the ball in versus running a crosser. The ball kind of finds him a little bit, and you're just asking him to turn his body less. And we saw that. He had those 2 drops early, running straight up vertical routes, running 9s. And then later on, he gets 3 touchdowns. And a lot of that, a lot of the damage he did all in the day off the deep crossers. So I'm hoping to see a little bit more of that because his speed it's there. And because of that, it naturally creates separation because he's a tough dude to keep up with, especially considering his size and, strides and how long they are. So hopefully it's more of those deep crosses versus the, straight up vertical routes because his hands are just better. It's easier for him to call in the pass. It's just an easier play for him to make. Now, hopefully with time, he'll be able to just kind of work that vertical tree, which, Aaron Rodgers loved to have with Devontae Adams. So hopefully that does develop over time. But in the meantime, definitely take advantage of his skill set and get him on some deep crossers, and let's really open up this offense. So I'm excited to see where this Green Bay offense is moving forward. Top half of these power rankings. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, actually Tampa all the way up to Seattle, all staying put, and I'll kind of go through these pretty quick. Tampa did get the win, sorry, I am in the way. They're staying at 16 though. I just don't think Seattle put together their best performance, and we'll talk about that once we get to Seattle. And, Tampa did just enough. And I do think Rachaad White, I think he should be the starter moving forward. It's one of those things where running backs are correlated heavily to their offensive line play, but 5 forced missed tackles by Rachaad White this week. That's as many forced missed tackles as Lenny had the last 5 weeks. And if you're playing behind a suboptimal offensive line, that could be the difference, right? And I think you saw that some this week. And then you got Chris Godwin looking a little bit healthier, Julio Jones with a little bit more juice. It just feels like this team's kind of starting to get back on track, which, the NFC South's open. If this team starts figuring it out, they're right back into that NFC, top of the list contender type of consideration. Then the Titans, they beat the Broncos, and they won by 7, and they didn't really look all that inspiring either. So they got to win, but I give a ton of credit to Mike Vrabel. He is just scrapping together pieces. Rashad Weaver, second-year player, has 8 pressures in this game. He was just getting production from places that you wouldn't expect, right? Give him a ton of credit, but based off what we saw, that's pretty rough. And especially considering it was Denver slowing down Derrick Henry, and that's why that offense was so stagnant and kind of stale. And then it takes the flea flicker to kind of jumpstart it. So again, they're figuring it out, but this team, that was not a win that I would necessarily, have a parade for. Then the Giants, solid win, but it came against the number 32 team in these power rankings. I don't need to explain that, but I will say the man on the screen here, Saquon Barkley, is an absolute animal. And, one of my favorite plays of this week was betting his over rushing props, and shout out to him. He got that with ease. I think he did it like midway through the third quarter, so nearly had it at halftime. And then the Jets and the Patriots are both on bye, so I didn't want to touch them. I contemplated flipping the Patriots and the Giants. You could do that. You could convince me to that. But nonetheless, the Giants, Jets, and Patriots all kind of suffer from the same thing, being good teams, but what's that quarterback? How far are they really going to go given their quarterback play? And then the Seahawks, yes, I know Tampa Bay beat them, but yet Seattle's ahead of them. They still have a better record. I still think, this is a totality of the season. We're looking at the entire resume, and I think Seattle's got a better resume right now. And honestly, had they had one more quarter in that game, I'd be interested to see what Seattle can do. I bet you Seattle might be able to make the comeback. Maybe it's just an awesome backdoor cover, and I had a couple teaser legs with them at +8 and +9, so shout out to them for keeping those bets alive, including my lock of the week from the Hurry Up Offense. Be sure to check out this week's episode on Thursday at noon. But it's one of those things where I just don't think this was one of their best performances. So I kind of consider this one an outlier, but even really just the first half I considered an outlier, because then, obviously they covered the teaser leg of it. And again, with one more quarter, I'd be interested to see where that game goes. Then we get to the Chargers, down a couple spots, and I still think this Chargers team is good. I still do. Kind of a weird, ugly loss, but that first drive, it's like, dude, that's what Herbert could be. That's what Herbert could be. But then we didn't see the rest of the game. He had like 160 passing yards in the first half, and then like the second half, he had like 60 in total. So kind of night and day. Give credit to San Francisco. We'll talk about it here shortly, but this is the week I think they get Keenan Allen and Mike Williams back. Mike Williams sounds like he's ahead of schedule, and it feels like Keenan Allen's been out waiting for this Kansas City game on Sunday Night Football. So they're getting 7 points. That's kind of one of my early bets I like heading into week 11. I think the Chargers are going to put on a show. I think they're going to kind of show, and it's in one of those divisional split situations where I think the Chargers get the job done on Sunday Night Football next week. And part of that's just because they're getting healthy. And you see Herbert getting healthy too. That was one of the other big things. So we're talking about those wide receivers. Justin Herbert was moving around more than we had seen. I think how much he moved around the pocket this week was more than what we had seen the last 4 weeks combined. So good to see him kind of moving like his normal self. And the Cincinnati Bengals were on bye, so I'm going to have them sticking at number 9. On to the top 8, Dallas Cowboys. They lost the Packers, but I'm really not worried about Dallas. Kind of just took a Aaron Rodgers Herculean effort. Christian Watson doing something that really wasn't something that he'd been doing all year long with those deep crossers. So I could see why the Cowboys weren't maybe prepped for that. It wasn't in their tape, wasn't in their scouting. So I'm not really worried about it. I do think this team could use that one more wide receiver. So hopefully OBJ. OBJ right now, the Bills and the Cowboys have got to be hitting that man up. Both coming off of losses, right? That sense of urgency is there for both those teams. We'll talk about the Bills here in a minute, but it feels like his market just got that much hotter with those two teams taking an L. But all things considered, I think Dak can continue to get better week by week. It'll be interesting to see that Pollard Zeke mix moving forward, because Pollard really has been really fun to watch. And I think this was the 1 week where the defense kind of got cooked. It was like the most yards they've allowed, and not only this season, but even dating back to like midway through last season or something like that. I couldn't remember the exact stat, but it was the weaker performance that we've seen from the defense in a while. So I kind of consider this loss an outlier as well. And the Dolphins into the top 7 once again, moving up 3 spots. Like I said earlier, that offense is moving like no other offense in the league right now. I mean, ton of credit to Mike McDaniel. That offense is just so fun to watch right now. And Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, the run game's been great. And this is the type of game Teron Armstead held his own against Myles Garrett. That is the why you make that signing, right? And because of that, Jalen Waddle doesn't find the end zone, but he makes big plays. Tyreek Hill finds the end zone another once again. He might go for 2,000 yards receiving this year. I don't know. But and Tua. I mean, the story is Tua. Like, give him a ton of credit. Like, I have Geno Smith as my comeback player of the year, but Tua really should be in that conversation. Maybe it's not comeback, maybe it's the most improved. Even if I think that's just an NBA award. So sorry about that, but that type of consideration, those two really have earned that type of recognition and should be considered for that award, in my opinion. And then we get to the 49ers up a spot. Definitely wasn't pretty. But you saw enough of the offensive pieces right, and honestly, Elijah Mitchell looks more efficient as a runner, but then CMC is that extra pass catcher, and he's been efficient on the ground. I'm not really worried about him moving forward as the runner, as the lead back in that backfield. But you got Debo back, Brandon Ayuk's making a couple plays. He did also have a couple drops, which is frustrating, and a little bit less George Kittle than I would have expected. And that he seems to be the guy, which is weird. But when this team is fully healthy, it feels like Kittle somehow always forgotten about. So it'll be interesting to see how Shanahan kind of mixes that play calling. It's kind of like basketball, kind of sticking with that. where, early on, I'm even watching the Celtics game yesterday, they won by like 5. You're seeing every player that they want to get out to a hot start get a shot early. It'd be nice to see San Francisco be able to pepper it around, make sure each and every one of those playmakers is getting the ball in their hands. Ravens were on by, so they're going to stick at 5. Eagles, first loss of the season, down 2 spots, and have them flip the Vikings, who I think now, as much as the last couple of weeks I've been saying, it's those 3 teams. It's Kansas City, it's the Bills, it's the Eagles. Those are the 3 teams that right now feel like they're in a league of their own. The win this week for the Vikings, had some, I don't want to say fluky, but I really don't mean it in such a negative way as that may sound. But they had some fluky moments, but they showcased, hey, we can hang with them. Even if they lost, I was ready to say Minnesota's better than what I expected. But they won. So starting with the Eagles, hey, look, Washington needed every leg of that parlay to hit. And, part of it is controlling the time of possession, running the ball like almost 40 times, converting 75 to 80% of the third downs. They already needed all that. But on top of that, A.J. Brown drops, a pass that becomes a pick. And, I don't want to blame A.J. Brown because, he did get banged up earlier on in this game. That ankle injury felt like it really kind of limited him, which is unfortunate if you're a Philly fan. But that said, even if you're not saying he dropped it and correlated that pick, most of the time when a receiver drops it, it's not finding a DB's hands. It's going to the ground, right? So that's a weird play. And, it's a play that A.J. Brown normally makes, and maybe if he's at 100%, he reels it in. Quez Watkins. That ball was an absolute dime dropped. Jalen Hurts is 10 cents lighter after dropping that dime. And Quez Watkins gets back up and immediately fumbles when he's hit from behind. Like, come on now. And then you have the Dallas Goedert fumble. Clearly a missed face mask. Instead of a change of possession, it should have been Philly on the other side of the 50. Should have been in Washington territory. Like, what are we doing here? So, Jalen Hurts really got the short end of the stick. Like, he's the ultimate loser of that contest because 3 turnovers. And I don't think any of them really are his fault. And obviously 2 fumbles, they are not correlated. But Dallas Goedert, I think, should be given the pass there. And Quez Watkins, you got to hold on that football. That's inexcusable. But again, I think it just took every leg of that parlay hitting for Washington to win this game. But hey, credit to Washington, they got the job done. So now Philly going to be looking for some revenge. It was interesting to see how, I don't want to say flat, because they did score early and they had those chunk plays, and Jalen Hurts played really well. At home, I just didn't see that. I just didn't see them getting out-muscled at home. Kind of weird, but hey, divisional splits, they'll be a bitch. So, top 3, Bills, they lost, but I'm kind of giving the Vikings the edge here by just moving them up to 2 because I still think this Bills team's legit. Where my concern for Buffalo is, another week where I'm like, dude, Josh Allen, like president of the Josh Allen fan club here. These turnovers are starting to get out of control, and really this week it's like, dude, there's one thing you can't have happen when you're taking a snap at your own 1. And it's outside of the context that game was in. The one thing you can't do at your own 1-yard line is botch the snap. That's exactly what he does. And then you add on the layers of context of that cost you the lead. There was 44 seconds left. You get the snap, move forward with the QB sneak. Maybe you run one more play, but you might not even need to do that. The game might be done. You win a tough battle. And then that second pick to Pat Peterson, the one Gabe Davis in overtime, Gabe Davis the intended target, it was like second down. There's just no need to force that throw in that spot. There's time. The reason they got down that far down the field was with his legs. So even if you don't see anybody open, maybe there's something to do with his legs. I think Minnesota had a spy on that play. But just throw it to the back of the end zone. There's no reason to force that throw at that exact moment when you can live to fight another play. So the turnovers are still an issue. But that being said, how many times is Josh Allen going to fumble at the 1-yard line in a game-deciding decision? I would think never again. It's another week where his interceptions catch up to him, so that's plausible to happen. Hopefully Sean McDermott fixes that. And then the other big thing is like that Justin Jefferson snag that's on the thumbnail, that's 1 in a million. That's 1 in a million. So there's a ton of different things. And there's a couple other Justin Jefferson catches where it's like, dude, what are the odds that happens? So this was an improbable loss for the Bills. So I still see them as one of the best teams in the league, but that leads me to the Minnesota Vikings. Ton of credit to Minnesota. Going on the road, and even if it was an improbable win, again, even if they lost, I was ready to consider them a legit team. Like, they were not going to fall down from 4 after that loss. They won. And, Justin Jefferson, if Minnesota is not putting a contract in front of this man this week, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is doing, because this is the game that proves why you need a number 1 wide receiver. Just kind of like how Devontae Adams used to have those takeover games in Green Bay. And we've seen Tyreek Hill have games where it just don't make sense. It's box score look like something out of a Madden for Miami. Justin Jefferson did that this week. And he's won. He's wide receiver 1. he was, I took him actually in fantasy 1 or 2 in a couple leagues, had him followed me in 3 in another league, but big on Justin Jefferson, and I think it's safe to say he's the best wide receiver in the league right now. Him and Tyreek Hill. The numbers they're putting up are just insane. But they do win in different ways, and their offenses are different. But he had 9 catches this week with an NGS catch probability below 50%. Kirk Cousins is literally not even throwing 50-50 balls. He's literally, Justin Jefferson has less than a 50% chance, probability-wise, including that one on 4th and 18. That's one of the best catches of all time. The Stephon Diggs catch earlier that game where he, just saves another potential interception from Josh Allen, one-handed snag, first down, chains keep moving. That's one of the best catches of the season, no doubt. That Justin Jefferson catch is one of the best all time. And pay the man. Pay the man. He's wide receiver 1 in the league right now, in my opinion. So, bonkers stuff. Vikings get a massive win. And now it'll be interesting to see how they handle Dallas. They're at home, but Dallas is actually getting a 1.5. It's one of the bets I made early. Vikings getting a 1.5, but also their money line at plus 100. I hit it, but it does kind of feel like it could be a potential letdown spot. But they're returning home, and I know the Vikings fans are going to go crazy getting to see their team after what they showcased last Sunday. But man, what a win. And what a total team effort, really. The offense, but also the defense. Timely plays to Darius Smith had some big moments. Pat Pete, obviously 2 picks, and can't sing the praises of the Vikings enough. And then the Chiefs at number 1, it took care of business against a, not as good Jacksonville team. I think if the Super Bowl were today, the Chiefs would be laying at least a 1.5, more than likely 2.5 against Minnesota. So I'm going to give them that edge. I think at their best, they're the best team in the league right now. And, I think the Bills aren't far behind. The Vikings have put themselves in that conversation. And I don't think we should forget about Philadelphia either. But that's going to do it for my Week 11 NFL Power Rankings. Give me your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who's your favorite team? Where do you think they should factor in the mix? Love to have your thoughts. I respond to every comment, so let's talk about it down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you stayed this far to watch this video, I really do appreciate it. Hit that big red subscribe button while you're down below. That's going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I'm signing off.